So this is a question paper that I am solving, writing answers for one by one. And with each question I do, I'm going to dig deeper into the other keywords related to the topic. We'll try to cover the syllabus a bit more and gather some examples and see some. Yeah, you'll see what we're gonna do. So, so the second question from the paper: why did the armies of British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of the then Indian rulers? Give reasons. I've already written the answer. So, the first step we are going to take is that we have extracted the exact line from the syllabus from where this question arrives. And these are the keywords, broad keywords within the syllabus point, I would say. So now we are looking at previous year questions from each of these keywords. So Battle of Plassey, British East India Company, British East India Company. All right, military organization, military reforms. All right, Anglo-Indian wars, colonial warfare, and this is where the current question that we're dealing with comes from. Indian resistance, 1857, and in the early Indian resistance movements. Battle of Plassey. The more we go through these terms, these keywords, these everything in this language, the better our answers become. That's what I feel. Now it's time to incorporate the language of these subjects into our language. So, your Battle of Buxar and Plassey and divide and rule policy, Indian states fragmentation. Okay, and now these are some extra questions which will help us cover the entire keyword in totality. Whatever is missing from the PYQs will be covered here. So these are the extra questions. We have two for each keyword. So basically, the question. So basically, here's the question, and this is the answer. So let's go. The British East India Company's consistent victories over Indian armies can be attributed to. Let's directly begin with the answer. You can add some introduction. Superior military organization. Alright, I've written this. The British had well structured, disciplined, and professional army. Professional body. This is the key term. Trained in modern warfare techniques, unlike the fragmented and often poorly organized forces of Indian rulers. Alright, though, so we would say the military modernization and professionalism. The next point is advanced weaponry and technology. The question is, if somebody hasn't followed this, the question is, even though the Indian rulers had larger and better equipped armies, the British East India Company was able to consistently gain victories against these. So, what are the possible reasons? So, we have seen there's a military organization, modern organization, and a professional organization of the European armies. And advanced weaponry, like they had more mobile artillery, and we had अपने तोप शायद, and firearms भी हम यूरोप से ही लाते थे. Ottoman and Europeans, ये लोग pioneers थे in firearm technology. And because they had already been fighting so many wars within Europe, that they had brought this discipline into their army and advanced research and technology in warfare, which gave them significant edge in battles. Efficient leadership, ये भी मैंने लिखा है. I haven't missed this also. I have missed just this point. Alright, so efficient leadership, the company was led by experienced and strategically astute commanders like Robert Clive and Baron Hastings, who could outmaneuver Indian leaders. Alright, I didn't mention these names, but now I would. political, ये क्या होता है कि once you see that these names are mentioned, you get the confidence to mention these names. Political social fragmentation, right? Indian states were divided by internal conflicts and lack of unity, mutual distrust, which the British exploited through diplomacy and alliances, including the use of divide and rule. Divide and rule हम तो ये highlight करेंगे, है ना? और financial resources, but एक और point मैं बताना चाहता था कि people would be tempted to write subsidiary alliance or something. Uh, but the question is, even though they had bigger armies, how did they defeat the bigger armies of yeah, the Indian rulers? How did the British defeat these people? So subsidiary alliance में actually there is no real fight that's happening. You're already stationed in the Indian ruler's kingdom, and the king is or the ruler is paying for your services. You have overtaken their state by some diplomatic move. So that's not a war actually. And if you are running short of points, you may add whatever. But at the end, financial resources, the British had access to better financial resources, enabling them to maintain and supply their forces effectively, and these factors collectively ensured British, yeah, companies' dominance over more numerous Indian armies. So now, in addition to what we have done, we are going to do 4 more questions from British East India Company. That's the keyword, British East India Company. So we are going to do 4 more questions from that. So let's see what areas we cover. The Battle of Plassey was one of the major turning points in Indian history. Discuss. All right. So without reading the answer yet, what do we think of Plassey? All right. So the Battle of Plassey, fought on 23rd June 1757, is widely regarded as a decisive moment in Indian history that marked the beginning of British colonial dominance. Alright, dominance, the beginning of their dominance. The battle, although minor in terms of actual combat, had profound implications for the future of India. Decisive battle that decided the British dominance and the body establishment of British political power. ये चीज़ें ऐसी भी नहीं है कि I'm going to write these things down and then read them again perhaps so that I have this in memory. I'm just trusting myself with my memory now because अब वो time आ चुका है कि there's a lot of stuff that will go into your head. You can't just note it down, note everything down and revise it. You just have to start using the RAM of your brain, whatever. So the victory at Plassey allowed British East India Company to establish control over Bengal, the richest province of India, which provided vast resources for further expansion. All right. So ये language, richest province of India, ये सब is a part of the language of a history answer. When you mention about its grandeur or something, whatever, which provides vast resource for further expansion. It marked the transition of company from a trading entity to a political power, with the company gaining the right to collect revenue from Bengal, which was later formalized in the Treaty of Allahabad. So, weakening of Indian states. The battle exposed vulnerabilities of Indian rulers, such as internal dissensions, lack of unity, and outdated military tactics. And the defection of Mir Jafar, one of the Nawab's key commanders to the British side, highlighted the British ability to exploit these internal weaknesses. So it says one of the reasons is, let's just look at the question, was major turning points in Indian history. So what were the major events that mark this turning point is the exposure of Indian rulers, vulnerabilities of their internal problems, lack of unity, and also outdated military tactics. So, the defection of Mir Jafar also was one key element. And the economic impact, the battle led to the transfer of Bengal's immense wealth to the British, which was used to finance their further military campaign in India. Alright, economic impact. The economic exploitation of Bengal post Plassey through oppressive revenue policies contributed to the decline of the region's prosperity and frequent famines. Okay, this is an effect. Foundation of British expansion. So there's an economic support that has come from. So basically, when the Plassey, after Plassey, the British became a political power in Bengal, secured the Diwani rights from Allahabad, and became an economic power to fund its other campaigns. And also the Indian military tactics and Indian people warfare strategy. This was exposed to the British, and their internal problems were clearly seen as the easy places to attack. Foundation for British expansion, the control over Bengal served as a springboard for British expansion across India, leading to eventual establishment of British rule over the entire subcontinent by the mid 19th century. Foundation of British expansion, alright. Concluding the Battle of Plassey was more than just a military engagement, it was the cornerstone that facilitated British colonialism in India. Its success enabled the British to dominate Indian politics, economics, and society, laying the foundation for nearly 2 centuries of British rule. Alright, jitna bhi boring lage, we have to keep reading this kind of stuff so that this language is imbibed in us. Alright, so we move to the next question. We are done here. And the next question is, discuss the role of the British East India Company in the economic and social transformation of India in the 18th and 19th centuries. Alright, it's a PYQ from 2019. Introduction. The British East India Company, initially a commercial entity, played a crucial role in reshaping India's economic and social landscape during the 18th and 19th centuries. So it's introduced as initially a commercial entity, then later changing India's social economic landscape. Alright, has affected both socio-economic landscape. Its transition from trade to territorial control brought about significant changes that had long-lasting impacts on Indian society. Alright, so there's something we're gonna extract from here, which must be, so the British East India Company, we have done this. The body is what's going to be the heading of the body? Let's just think. A role of British East India Company in the economic and social transformation of India in 18th and 19th centuries. In short, what would that be? Socio-economic transformation. I'll just write that. So here it is economic transformation. Um, and so perhaps this is how it can be divided. So let's see. And with an economic transformation, it's colonial economy. The company imposed a colonial economy focused on the extraction of raw materials for export to Britain, undermining India's traditional industries. Isn't that right? Deindustrialization, the decline of Indian handicrafts and industries, particularly textiles, due to the influx of British manufactured goods, led to widespread unemployment and economic distress. So, and the third thing is, no, we are going to discuss all these three and put stuff in perspective and stuff in simple words so that we can easily remember. We'll do that. The last point is the land revenue policies, the introduction of permanent settlement 1793.
in Bengal and other revenue systems like Rayatwari and Malwari led to the commercialization of agriculture, increasing the burden on peasants and contributing to famines.
All right. So in economy, we should always think of things in terms of sectors. So the agriculture sector, the here is the land revenue policy, which was perhaps sucking the blood out of these people. So they've also mentioned three permanent settlement, Raitwari, Malwari. You can just write them as extra whatever data points, arrow laga ke kuch bhi, that kind of stuff. And deindustrialization. So and the other sectors now is manufacturing, क्योंकि services तो थे नहीं. But banks वैंक्स ये सब तो services ही है वैसे. तो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में डी इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ख़त्म किया और यहाँ पे खुद के लिए मार्केट बनाया. और सबसे उससे पहले वाली चीज़ है कि रॉ मटेरियल्स यहाँ से एक्सट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं. सो बेसिकली अपने को पता है ये डायमेंशंस, बट इट इज़ नेसेसरी टू mention them as separate things, where they're extracting raw materials from here. That's colonial economy. And when you're killing the manufacturing inside, that is deindustrialization, right? That's a nice word. All right. So the next thing is social transformation and education, perhaps health, urbanization, poverty, hunger. These are the things we should talk about. So education and westernization. The British introduced Western education, leading to the rise of a new educated Indian middle class that played a key role in social reform movements and eventual struggle for independence. All right, ठीक है. This is we are learning. We are in place of reading books. We are reading from uh, a collection of books. So legal and social reforms. The company introduced legal reforms, including the codification of laws, which affected traditional social structures, right? The reforms like the abolition of sati 1829 reflected the company's influence on social practices, okay? But I would rather give another example, the Age of Consent Act, which reduced the legal age of marriage for both boys and girls, and which actually increased. I'm sorry, which actually increased the age of marriages, which was socially good, but Tilak ji had been vocally against it. For they wanted these reforms to come from within us and not be imposed by a foreign government. So yeah, that's what he meant by Swaraj, perhaps. And so legal and social reforms that were happening, and so they were affecting the traditional social structures. This is a very nice point. And urbanization, the growth of urban centers due to trade and administrative needs led to changes in social dynamics, including the rise of a new professional class. All right, so ये भी political भी पढ़ लेते हैं. Centralized administration. The company's administrative policies laid the groundwork for centralized governance in India, which continued until under the British Crown post 1858 and so on. The centralized governance, centralized model, administrative structure. All right, and division and fragmentation. The company's policies often exacerbated divisions within Indian society, particularly along religious and caste lines, contributing to long-term social fragmentation. So yeah, the policy was to exacerbate the already faulting lines. Um, Conclusion: the British East India Company's role in India was transformative, bringing about profound economic social changes while it introduced some modernizing influences. Its primary legacy is one of economic exploitation and social disruption, which left deep scars on Indian society. So this is very clear. Economically, they just wanted to exploit to the core, and socially they just disrupted man. So we're just going to ponder a bit more
on the social transformation stuff. So what do we do here is we recall what effects did it bring. Social disruption, I would say. All right, and here economic exploitation. So सोशल डिसरप्शन में हुआ क्या सोशली आपके साथ बिकॉज ऑफ द ब्रिटिश socially they tried to modernize us on their lines, that is westernize. They tried to westernize us, all right, and they imposed this English education and this gave rise to a new middle class. New middle class is okay, is an economic way of looking at it, but there's also new intelligentsia, I would say. All right, and there were lots of social reformers, social reforms, advocacy, etc., that were happening because of the education programs and westernization and education. And what else has happened socially is fragmentation, I would say. uh, Social fragmentation by by the British, by um, their legal reforms. Is that so? The codification of laws, the fragmentation by their attempts to codify, codification of laws. That's when it began. I mean, that's still going on, and that's what is still happening. It's an attempt to fragment the society when you try to try to bring into code and strict rules. Um, and you have to do such things very carefully. But right now, these attempts are clearly just to cause more boil in the society. That's what is happening. The political culture, dissatisfaction. All right. So इकोनॉमिकली हुआ क्या था कि रॉ मटेरियल एक्सट्रैक्ट कर रहे थे एंड यहाँ के इंडस्ट्रीज को ख़त्म कर रहे थे, लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एंड एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर. ऑलवेज रिमेंबर इकोनॉमिक थिंग में यू हैव टू गो बाई सेक्टर्स, नहीं तो एग्रीकल्चर भूल जाओगे. लैंड रेवेन्यू, ऑल राइट, एंड सोशल डिस्ट्रप्शन में भी हैव सीन हेल्थ में कुछ और हेल्थ में कुछ हमने देखा नहीं, बट फेमाइंस. मतलब हम कुछ भी लिख सकते हैं. दीज आर द ब्रॉड पॉइंट्स कि वेस्टर्नाइजेशन, एजुकेशन एंड फ्रैगमेंटेशन ऑफ द सोसाइटी. एंड जहाँ भी दे हैव ट्राइड टू कोडिफाई थिंग्स, इवन पॉलिटिकल कंसीक्वेंसेस में इट इज सेड कि जब जैसे वोटिंग राइट्स थे या वॉट एवर इज हैपनिंग पॉलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट, इट एक्चुअली व्हेन डन केयरलेसली, it causes further troubles and fragment deepening of these fault lines. All right, so you have to bring everybody to a consensus and with a lot of deliberation, and that's how you develop uh, the political code, the contract, social contract. Anyway, so we are done with the PYQs and the two more questions. So we'll be done with British East India Company, and you have seen what other keywords are there, the military organization, etc., etc., and many will be overlapping with the information present in these answers. But these are the broad themes, basically, on which the UPSC asks questions. So we're just going to go ahead and analyze the administrative strategies employed by the British East India Company that led to the consolidation of British power in India. Now, administrative strategies basically, it's not military strategies. So now let's just maybe brainstorm. So let's just read the answer now.
The British East India Company's transition from a trading corporation to a ruling entity in India was marked by strategic administrative maneuvers that allowed it to consolidate power over Indian continent, subcontinent, and embody the dual government system, right? One of the most effective things. The company introduced dual government in Bengal, 1765. Oh, all right, they're talking about that time, not the diarchy. Separating revenue collection from administration. Okay, that's the main strategic thing. You gotta note this down. Separating revenue collection from administration, which allowed them to control finances while leaving nominal power with Indian rulers. Okay, the separation of the Nawabi and Diwani, where these people are collecting the revenues, the British people, and the duty to look after the law and order situation is for the Nawabs, and they don't have the money. These are controlling the finances. So strategic alliances and subsidiary alliance. The company formed strategic alliances with Indian rulers through the subsidiary alliance system, where Indian states were required to maintain British troops and accept British control over their foreign affairs. Right, very well designed strategic alliance, subsidiary alliance. Right, and I have written this in my points also. Doctrine of lapse is another thing. Lord Dalhousie, this policy allowed the company to annex states where the ruler died without a male heir, and thereby expanding British territories in India. And legal and judicial reforms. The introduction of a codified legal system under the Regulating Act of 1773 and subsequent acts helped in centralizing power and establishing British legal principles across their territories. Yeah, so I wrote about the abolition of Board of Control later, taking the power from the Board of Control to the court. I'm sorry, taking the power from the Court of Directors to the Board of Control, being controlled by the Parliament directly. Alright, I hope I have not confused you. The introduction of a codified legal system, 1773, where it helped them structure their, their company and its relation with the Parliament, and it later helped in centralizing power and establishing British legal principles across their territories. Right, revenue administration. The permanent settlement in Bengal, 1793, and other revenue policies increased companies' control over land and revenue, securing a steady income that financed their military campaigns, divide and rule. The company adeptly exploited divisions among Indian rulers and communities, using these divisions to weaken resistance and consolidate their rule. The British East India Company's administrative strategies were instrumental in consolidating British power in India. These strategies laid the foundation for British colonial rule, which was characterized by centralized control and exploitation of Indian resources. Alright. So basically, when talking about consolidation, you're talking about the times pre 1800 when perhaps they get the Diwali rights here, and after that, 1773, the regulating act through which perhaps they bring the company under the parliament. But that's not a very important thing for me. But I'm just telling you, consolidation perhaps begins around at this time. All right, even though I don't think this is a great point here. But so the timeline is this. This is when the consolidation begins, and how does it happen? Is by separation of the Nawabi and the Diwani rights, and then this is perhaps happened in 1765. All right, and so the British people have the Diwani rights, collecting revenue, and the responsibility of maintaining law and order, and the state is on the Nawabs, and that is one administrative thing. And in 1793, they brought the
permanent settlement, which boosted their uh, incomes to further expand and consolidate. And what else? And the administrative techniques they used, the subsidiary alliance. There's something nice that this answer has written about subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance, and there's doctrine of lapse, and what else? There's differential treatment of different communities. Yeah, there's appeasement, divide and rule, I would say, and all right. And so, what was that about subsidiary alliance that I was talking about? Um, yeah, the foreign affairs thing, control on foreign affairs. That was a strategic move, of which the consequences, perhaps the rulers couldn't imagine and also couldn't escape it. All right. So, and the doctrine of lapse and divide and rule, of course, and then economic boost, and this was one dark move. And what else? I have written some things more, but let's see what qualifies and what doesn't. Hindu, whatever, divide and rule. We have done this. Um, Initially, there were a lot of Hindu people getting into government jobs, and after 1857, there was a particular uh, perspective in the British that it were the Muslims who fought against them mostly. So they kind of tried to alienate them, and then rose the individual Muslim movement. And then later, after decades, British started appeasing Muslims. So the entire change in policy of British towards the communal um, divisions and different communities. So I wrote diarchy, but now I understood ki it's not about the entire British duration. We're talking about when consolidation. It's talking about perhaps the earlier times. But I will also maybe write the non-official council representations to let these constitutionalists went off whatever, and token representations and stuff being given. Those were administrative moves. And another administrative move was to shift power from the Court of Directors to the Board of Control. And perhaps another administrative move was to bring all the princely states directly under the umbrella of the Queen herself. And all right, and these administrative moves, education, English education, and training of a middle class intelligentsia, westernized intelligentsia, so that there's also a market for British goods. That's also an administrative move. So perhaps there's a lot of scope of things to write. But yeah, these are some nice points, talking mainly about the masterstroke that they initially made, and this one comes later, all right. But subsidiary alliance, doctrine of lapse, and this one are compulsory in your answer, and then the divide and rule, etc. Then they come, all right. So now the next question is discuss the economic policies of British East India Company and their impact on Indian agriculture and trade. Alright, this is asking about two sectors. Introduction. The economic policies of British East India Company were designed primarily to benefit British interests, leading to significant changes in Indian agriculture and trade during 18th and 19th centuries. Body commercialization of agriculture. Alright, what's happening in agriculture? Commercialization of it, deindustrialization, and then commercialization of agriculture. And so, cash crop economy. The company encouraged the cultivation of cash crops like indigo, cotton, opium over food grains, which disrupted the traditional agricultural practices and led to food shortages. All right, and permanent settlement implemented in 1793 in Bengal. This policy led to the commercialization of agriculture, with zamindars being made responsible for revenue collection, often at the cost of the peasants' welfare.
Okay, deindustrialization. We'll ponder on these points once again, yeah. And so deindustrialization, decline of handicrafts, the import of cheap British manufactured goods led to the collapse of traditional Indian industries, especially textiles, contributing to the widespread unemployment and drain of wealth. So there's a lot of unemployment, and these people come to the agriculture sector to work, and there's only limited land, and there's fragmentation of land, and there's stress on land because so many people are just feeding off from the that piece of land that's limited. Drain of wealth. The economic policies facilitated the drain of wealth from India to Britain, as profits from Indian trade were repatriated rather than reinvested in the Indian economy. All right, that is the perfect critique. So we'll come here again, and so drain of whenever you talk about the drain of wealth, you should you should conclude the point by saying, yeah, the investments were then not made in the economy itself, but were sent to Britain. That's why it's called the drain of wealth, and also, yeah, deindustrialization. And what about the agriculture? There's the land revenue, taxing land revenue system, and there's cash crop commercialization. All right, and there's lands degradation because there's no interest in improving the land quality because it's not anybody's land. It's only for a contract. Um, Impact on trade. A monopoly on trade. The company established a monopoly over India's foreign trade, particularly in commodities like tea, opium, and cotton, which were exported to Britain and China, further integrating India into the global economy on unequal terms. Oh God. Okay, further integrating India into the global economy on unequal terms. Right? There's no real value being paid for the material that is being exported from India. All right, and destruction of indigenous trade networks, traditional trade routes and networks were disrupted, and Indian merchants were marginalized as the company took over key trading activities. Yeah, this is clear. So the question here was discuss the economic policies, all right, and their impact on Indian agriculture and trade. So the discussion of economic policies here is happening in agriculture sector, industrial sector, the trade, and the food security and health, those aspects. All right. And what's the impact of economic policies on in agriculture and trade are to be discussed. So agriculture and handicrafts भी trade में आएंगे. Drain of wealth is not something about trade particularly, and not particularly about agriculture, but only stands here because of the discussion on economic policy. um, Monopoly and trade. Okay, destruction of indigenous trade networks. So trade में local structures को disrupt किए. Even socially भी वही कर रहे थे. Social structures disrupt कर रहे थे with their loss and limited understanding of our loss and whatever. So trade structure सब कुछ disruption चल रहा था. Traditional चीज़ and this imposition of their own thing. And वैसे agriculture में भी we see we जितना बार बार we go through these points in our heads. That's I mean I'm going to go as many times as it would help me to retain these things in my head. So famine and economic distress, food insecurity, the focus on cash crops and the exploitation of agricultural resources led to repeated famines. As agricultural production for domestic consumption was neglected, that's clear. Famine, food insecurity, and the economic displacement. The economic policies resulted in widespread poverty as traditional livelihoods were destroyed and the economic benefits of trade was siphoned off to Britain. Conclusion. The economic policies of the British East India Company had a devastating impact on Indian agriculture and trade while they facilitated the integration of India into the global economy. They did so at the expense of India's traditional economic structures, leading to long term economic and social distress. Alright, so they say that in India's history, about its integration with global economy began with the British people, but then it was done on unequal terms at the expense of local traditional economic structures that were um, flourishing till then, leading to long-term economic and social distress. All right, so economic structures were disrupted, social structures were disrupted, so a lot of distress. All right, I think this much is enough. This, and I think these things will remain in head because we already know these things. And जैसे कि ये when we talk about drain of wealth, तो ये investment not in India but in Britain, reinvested, repatriated. So यही सब चीज़ें ट्रेडिशनल नेटवर्क्स को तोड़ना याद रह जाएंगी. I hope this is how I study. Now then, अभी इस वीडियो में we are going to end this video now, but in the next videos we are going to do some other questions, and we'll also finish the military organization, Anglo-Indian wars, colonial, these things one by one, and we'll be thorough. We will be able to write the answers if we do it like this. Yeah, dimensions भी याद रहेंगे, and कुछ miss नहीं होगा, सब relevant ही होगा. And even if we miss one, doesn't mean कि part टूट गया, कुछ हो गया. आधा मार्क, एक मार्क आपका कम होगा, कोई बात नहीं, लेकिन अच्छे मार्क्स आएंगे इस तरीके से. I feel so. Yeah, so we'll go through these questions and again and again and again, and somehow imbibe the language. All right, so alvida for now. I'll be doing some other video because मेरे को तो करना ही पड़ेगा. मतलब I can't make this video very long because you're not maybe writing mains or whatever, but मेरे को तो करता ही रहना पड़ेगा यही exercise. It'll be some other video, some other topic, some other question. I'll perhaps write some answer now on paper with pen. Okay, see you, bye.